I canceled the mortgage payment because my son said he wasn't expecting me for Christmas. That's the truth, not the whole truth. Because if I gave you the whole truth right here in the first breath, you'd click away, close this story, and try to scrub it out of your mind like a bad dream. So let's just start with the part that makes sense on the surface. I did something no parent should ever admit to, and the reason I did it is something you'll hate me for, something you'll wish I had kept to myself. But once I explain, you'll understand, or you'll think I'm insane. Maybe both. Now pause. Take a breath, because what I'm about to tell you isn't one of those neat little tales where everything gets tied up with a bow at the end, where evil is vanquished and life goes back to normal. No, life doesn't work like that. Contracts don't work like that. And if you keep listening, if you stay here with me, you'll know why my son said those words. You'll know why I made that choice. And you'll know why, if you were in my shoes, you might have done the same. So let's back up. I should probably introduce myself, but names don't matter here. Names are just labels, little stickers we slap on ourselves to convince each other we're still human. All you need to know is I was a parent, a homeowner, an ordinary person like you. Bills, groceries, emails piling up in the inbox, too many late nights at work, and a kid who grew up too fast for me to keep up with. I thought I was keeping it all together. I thought I was the kind of person who could still be surprised at Christmas by the simple joy of watching my son unwrap a gift. That was my one dream, the only thing I had left to hold on to see that flicker of childhood still alive in his face. But instead, he looked at me across the kitchen table, December cold pressing through the window glass, the hum of the fridge the only sound, and he said almost casually, "I wasn't expecting you for Christmas. Not I don't want you here. Not I wish you weren't my parent." No anger, no sarcasm, no eye roll, just flat, stated as fact. Like a weather report, like he was describing the way things were. And something inside me broke. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking it's just a teenage thing. Kids say weird stuff. You're probably thinking I overreacted, that maybe he was joking, or maybe I misheard. But you weren't there. You didn't hear the way his voice hit the air, the way it didn't sound like my son's voice at all. You didn't see the way his eyes looked too wide, too steady, like he was watching me for a reaction, like he was recording me. And you didn't feel it, the sudden weight in the room, the way the house seemed to lean in, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I swear to you, it wasn't normal. Now I should stop here. I should stop because I can feel you pulling back, doubting me, shaking your head. That's fine. That's normal. I doubted myself too. I told myself maybe he's tired. Maybe I'm tired. Maybe it's nothing. But you're here, still listening, which means part of you knows what I mean. Part of you has felt it too. Those tiny cracks in reality. Those offhand comments that don't add up. Those moments where someone you love looks at you and for 1 second you're not sure it's really them anymore. That's the hook I'm dangling in front of you. Because if you've ever had that feeling, then you know how deep this rabbit hole goes. And if you haven't, you will. By the time I'm finished, you will. That night, after he said it, I sat in my room with the lights off. No TV, no phone, just the dark, and I replayed it over and over. I wasn't expecting you for Christmas. Not expecting me. Not expecting me. The phrase crawled inside my skull like a worm. Why wouldn't my son expect me? Where else would I be? What did he know that I didn't? And then quietly, like a whisper that wasn't my own thought, the answer came, because the house wasn't expecting you either. I didn't say that aloud, at least I don't think I did. But the idea rooted itself in me, and the more I tried to shake it, the heavier it got. You ever had one of those nights where the silence in your house feels too thick? Like syrup, like something's moving just out of sight. That was me lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint tick of the radiator, and swearing it wasn't just heat expanding the pipe. No, it was something else. Something watching. Something that had been waiting patiently all year long for December to come back around. And when I thought of my son again, When I thought of the way his eyes had looked, I realized I wasn't just afraid of what he had said, I was afraid of what he had meant. Here's where I need you to lean in. Don't drift. Don't think about skipping ahead, because if you miss this part, none of the rest will make sense. Christmas wasn't supposed to be ours. That's what I learned. That's what he was trying to tell me. The gifts, the lights, the mortgage payments, those weren't for us. They were for the house, for the thing behind the house, for the contract we never signed, but were still bound to. And when my son told me he wasn't expecting me, that was his way of warning me. Or maybe not him at all. Maybe the house using his mouth to speak. I canceled the mortgage payment the next day. That was my rebellion, my confession, my sin. I can hear you scoffing. Oh, big deal. You missed a payment. People miss payments all the time. But you don't understand. The mortgage wasn't money. It wasn't paper. It was blood. It was the vein that tied me to that house, that kept me in place, that told whatever was listening that I was still obedient. When I cut it off, when I severed it, it wasn't just a financial decision. It was a declaration of war. You'll say, I sound paranoid. You'll say, I sound delusional. And maybe you're right, but ask yourself, why are you still here, listening, hanging on every word, waiting to hear what happened next? It's because some part of you knows the truth. Some part of you has always suspected the little rituals we do. Mortgage payments, electric bills, property taxes. They're not just bureaucracy, they're offerings, little sacrifices to keep the machine fed. And when one person stops paying, the machine notices. By the end of this, you'll wish you hadn't stayed. You'll wish you had clicked away, watched a lighter story, scrolled to something funny, something harmless. But it's too late now. You're in it with me. Just remember, I didn't choose this. I didn't ask for it. I only wanted Christmas with my son. And instead, I got a warning. I wasn't expecting you for Christmas. If you think that's strange, wait until you hear what happened when December 24th finally arrived. If you're still here, that means you're curious enough to know how it all began before everything cracked open. You want to understand the part I keep circling back to, the so-called normal life I had before my son said what he said. So let me give you that picture. Let me paint it in detail. Because without the ordinary, the horror doesn't hit. Without the safe glow of the fireplace, the shadows don't matter. My life was painfully average, boring. Wake up, fight the alarm clock, drag myself into the shower, half listen to the weather guy on the radio, while brushing my teeth. Work, bills, groceries, laundry, repeat. I worked in a bland office, the kind with recycled air that makes your skin feel papery by the end of the day. Rows of cubicles, the faint smell of burnt coffee, co-workers who lived only for the next casual Friday. I wasn't special. My paycheck barely covered the mortgage, insurance, and the endless list of unexpected expenses. But I managed, and I told myself I was proud of that. Proud of holding it together for my kid, keeping a roof over his head, keeping the lights on, even if it meant I had nothing left for myself. That's what being a parent is, right? Bleeding yourself dry and calling it stability. Around December, things always got tight. That's the season of calculations. The lists, the hidden credit card debt, the mental math done in checkout lines. But I still loved Christmas. Or maybe I loved the memory of loving it. The way the lights used to look magical when I was a kid. The way snow meant possibility, not inconvenient. The way one good gift could make everything else fade into the background for a night. I wanted that for my son, even though he was getting older, even though he rolled his eyes at traditions, even though he spent most evenings in his room, with the door shut, and his headphones. That was normal. Teenagers need their space, or at least that's what I told myself. We lived in one of those cookie-cutter suburbs houses, lined up in neat rows, each with its little patch of grass and mailbox. Safety, order, predictability. On the surface, it looked peaceful. Snow frosting the rooftops, wreaths on the doors, inflatable Santas swaying in the cold wind. The kind of place where neighbors wave, while dragging trash bins to the curb. But if you paid attention, if you watched closely, you'd see it wasn't quite right. The neighbors never lingered out. They smiled. Yes, but their smiles were quick, sharp, gone before you could wave back. They didn't make eye contact for long. Conversations died in seconds, and when December rolled around, they seemed even more withdrawn. Lights went up on houses, but no laughter spilled out. Curtains stayed drawn tight. At night, walking the dog, I sometimes saw silhouettes moving behind those curtains. Not parties, not family dinners, just slow, deliberate movements. Watching, waiting. It felt like everyone in that neighborhood knew something. I didn't, and maybe they did. Inside my own house, things weren't much better. You know how a home has a rhythm. The creaks in the stairs, the hum of the fridge, the thrum of the heating vents, all part of its personality. Comforting, in a way, but in December, my house always felt wrong. The silence pressed too hard, like a weight on the chest. The creaks didn't sound random anymore. They sounded deliberate, like footsteps that stopped when you listened too closely. The air was too still, except when it wasn't. Except when I swore I felt a draft pass over my neck in a room with all the windows shut. And the smell, God, the smell, not strong, not constant, but every so often, in the dead of night I'd wake up and swear I caught a whiff of something metallic, like pennies, like blood. Still, I told myself it was fine. I made lists, grocery shopping for Christmas dinner, turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, the whole cliché. Gifts, cheap, but thoughtful, wrapping paper with tacky snowmen. I set up the tree, plugged in the lights, tried to force myself to feel cheerful, but my son barely looked up from his phone. When I asked if he wanted to help decorate, he muttered something. Maybe later, maybe nothing at all. I laughed it off. That's what parents do. We laugh off the silences, the distance, the way the kid who once clung to your leg now walks past you like a stranger in your own home. Normal, I told myself. Completely normal. But his silences were worse than any slammed door or shouted argument. His silences were empty, like he was saving his voice for something else. And the house noticed. I don't know how else to say. I'd be wrapping gifts at the dining table, scissors crunching through tape, and suddenly I'd realized the house had gone too quiet, too expectant, as if it was listening, as if it knew I was struggling to hold on to some thread of tradition, some illusion of family. And sometimes when my son walked through the room, it almost felt like he and the house were in on something together, like they shared a secret I wasn't supposed to know. I'll give you an example. One evening, about 2 weeks before Christmas, I caught my son standing in the living room, with the lights off, just standing there, staring at the tree. I asked what he was doing. He didn't flinch, didn't startle, didn't even look embarrassed. He just said, calmly, "The tree doesn't look right." I told him it was fine, that I'd fix the lights later, but he shook his head. "No, it's not supposed to be here. That's it." No explanation. Then he walked back upstairs, leaving me in the dark with the glow of the tree. And for the first time in my life, I hated Christmas lights, because they didn't look warm anymore. They looked like warning signs. Now I don't want you to think it was all doom and gloom. There were still moments that looked normal. From the outside, my son eating cereal at the kitchen counter, me balancing the checkbook, the hum of the dishwasher at night. But that's what made it worse. The contrast, the way the ordinary moments only made the cracks more obvious, because underneath the surface, beneath the clinking of spoons, the shuffle of mail through the door, the flicker of TV reruns, there was a tension, a waiting. And every night, when I lay in bed, staring into the dark, I felt it pressing closer. The house was waiting for something. I just didn't know what. You probably think I'm paranoid. That's fine. I thought so too. I told myself I was stressed, overworked, tired, that December does that to everyone, that the silence in the house was just loneliness, echoing back at. But then,
My son sat at that same kitchen table, looked at me with eyes that weren't his, and said the words that split my world in half. I wasn't expecting you for Christmas. It happened on a Thursday evening, ordinary on the surface. Gray sky outside, the kind of early winter dusk that presses down on you, turning the windows into mirrors. I was at the kitchen table, shuffling through bills, circling numbers in red pen. The mortgage statement spread out like a wound I couldn't close. My son sat across from me, spooning cereal into his mouth even though dinner was an hour away. The sound of the spoon tapping the bowl was the only rhythm in the house. I glanced up, maybe to remind him about homework, maybe just to fill the silence with small talk. But before I could open my mouth, he spoke, not looking at me, not even blinking. I wasn't expecting you for Christmas. The words didn't register at first. They didn't belong in this house, in this season, in this relationship between parent and child. I laughed weakly. What's that supposed to mean? He finally lifted his eyes, and I swear to you, I swear it didn't feel like my son looking back at me. His eyes were too still, too steady. I wasn't expecting you for Christmas. The exact same words, the exact same flat tone, like a machine replaying a line of code. You'd think I would have pressed him. You'd think I would have demanded an explanation. But I didn't. Something in the way he said it, something in the weight of it, shut me down. I tried to chuckle, forced normalcy into my voice. Well, tough luck, kiddo. You're stuck with me. Who else would cook the turkey? No smile, no roll of the eye. He just stared, spoon hovering halfway to his mouth, like he was watching me more than listening. The silence stretched so thin, I thought it would snap. Finally, he dropped the spoon back into the bowl with a dull clink. That's not what I meant. I should have asked. God, I should have asked. What did you mean? But I didn't, because a cold, crawling certainty had already slithered into me. Whatever he meant, I didn't want to hear it. So I did what parents do when their kids say something strange. I rationalized. Maybe he was being sarcastic. Maybe he was trying out some edgy joke he'd seen online. Maybe it was his way of saying he didn't care about Christmas anymore, that he was too old for it. Teenagers push buttons. That's what they do. Right, but here's the thing. When kids joke, there's always a flicker of life behind, a glint in the eye, a smirk tugging at the corner of the mouth, even if they're trying to hide it. There was nothing in my son's face that night. No spark, no humor, just blank, like he was reciting a fact. After a few beats, I forced myself back to the bill. I pretended I hadn't heard him. That was easier, safer, but the words sat heavy in the air. I could feel them clinging to me, sinking into the walls. When I looked up again, he was gone. I hadn't even heard him push back the chair or walk away. 1 second he was there, the next he wasn't. The cereal bowl still sat on the table, milk going warm. I stared at it for a long time, too long, until I caught myself wondering if he had ever really been there at all. That night, at dinner, he was quiet, not unusual, but now I couldn't unhear it. Every silence carried an echo. I wasn't expecting you for Christmas. I tried to make conversation, asked about school, friends, what he wanted this year. He shrugged at everything, eyes fixed on the plate in front of him. When I mentioned presents, he said, "You don't have to get me anything." "Of course I do," I said. "It's Christmas." And then he looked up, directly into my eyes, and with that same flat tone, he said, "Not for you." I nearly dropped my fork. "What does that mean?" I asked, sharper than I intended. He blinked once, then looked back down at his food. Nothing. That's the worst part, the way he dismissed it. Like I was the crazy one, like I'd imagined the whole thing. I told myself to let it go. He was tired. I was tired. Kids say things they don't mean, but I couldn't let it go. I carried those words around, like a splinter in my mind, turning them over, trying to make them harmless. I wasn't expecting you for Christmas. Maybe he meant I wasn't supposed to buy him gifts this year. Maybe he was saying, He didn't care if I worked through the holiday. Maybe it was his strange way of saying he'd outgrown it all, but no matter how I twisted it, the phrase still landed wrong, too final, too cold. Not don't bother, not don't fuss, not expecting, like I was never supposed to be there at all. It was the way the house felt after he said them. The quiet wasn't just quiet anymore, it was loaded, heavy. I found myself listening for footsteps upstairs, waiting for him to move, just to prove he was still there. Sometimes I'd catch a shadow under his door, the faint glow of a phone screen. Other times, nothing, and when he finally did come downstairs, I couldn't shake the thought, is that really him? Because something about him was off, not wrong enough to point to, not obvious, but subtle. The way his posture was too stiff, the way his sentences were short, the way he'd watch me a second too long before answering. Little things, the kind of things you'd miss, unless you were already looking. I started noticing patterns. He never touched the tree again. After that night, wouldn't sit near it, wouldn't even glance at. When I asked why, he said, "It's not for us." When I pushed, "What do you mean, not for us?" He just walked away. Another time, I caught him staring out the front window long after dark. I asked what he was looking at. He said, "They're already here." "Who?" I asked. He smiled, just for a second, and whispered, "You'll see." Then he shut the curtains and went upstairs, leaving me in the dark with my own reflection staring back. I tried to laugh it off. I really did. Maybe it was a game. Maybe he was messing with me. But deep down, I knew this wasn't my son anymore. Or if it was, something was speaking through him. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his words, hearing them in the silence, feeling them crawl along the edges of my mind. I wasn't expecting you for Christmas, not expecting me, and the more I thought about it, the more the house seemed to shift around me. The creaks in the walls didn't sound random, the shadows didn't feel empty, and for the first time since moving in, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. You ever feel like your house is waiting for you to leave? Not in the normal sense, not like the walls sigh with relief when you step outside. I mean waiting the way a hunter waits in the brush, silent, still patient, because it knows sooner or later you'll make a mistake. That's what my house became, a predator, disguised as drywall and carpet. It started small, little shifts that were easy to a chair out of place, angled slightly different from how I left it, a picture frame, tilting forward, though I knew I'd straightened it the night before, the kind of stuff you chalk up to bad memory or clumsy accidents, but they didn't stop. Every morning, something else had changed. The bowl I always kept on the counter ended up on the floor, the rug in the hallway flipped upside down, the lamp in the living room moved 2 feet to the left, its cords stretched tight like something had dragged it, and then the Christmas decorations started vanishing. I'd spent hours unpacking boxes from the attic, laying out ornaments, strings of lights, the little angel figurines I'd kept since my son was a baby, but they disappeared, one by one, not misplaced, gone. In their place, there'd be something wrong, a cracked snow globe, with no water inside, a toy soldier figure with its head missing, a candle, half burned, though I hadn't lit it. It felt like the house was swapping my memories for its own collection, decorating itself. The worst part came with the mail. When the first mortgage statement arrived, I almost laughed. The numbers made no sense. Instead of amounts and percentages, there were lines of digits that rearranged themselves. If I stared too long, interest rates that read like dates. December 25, over and over, stamped in black ink. In the margin, I swear I saw handwriting, not typed, but scrawled. Not yours, not anymore. I blinked, and the words were gone. Just neat columns of numbers again, but something inside me knew. I hadn't imagined it. My mortgage wasn't a contract with the bank. It was a contract with the house. Every payment I made didn't buy me security. It fed the thing growing inside these walls. Home is supposed to be safety. That's the dream, isn't it? You scrape together every cent, sign your name on the dotted line, and suddenly you belong somewhere. You own it. Except I was realizing the opposite. The house owned me. The creaks in the floorboards weren't random anymore. They followed me, one step behind. The vents hummed, with a sound too steady to be wind, like breath pushing through teeth. Sometimes I pressed my hand to the walls, and felt a faint vibration, a pulse. My shelter wasn't protecting me, it was steadying me. I confronted my son one evening. "Do you notice anything strange in the house?" I asked. My voice sounded thin, too casual. He was at the table, running his finger in slow circles across the wood. "It's not your house," he said without looking up. The words stung more than they should have. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I pay the bills. My name's on the mortgage. This roof, these walls, this is mine." He stopped tracing and lifted his eyes, dark and unreadable. "They're letting you stay, that's all." A chill knotted at the base of my spine. "Who's they?" He didn't answer, just returned his gaze to the table and kept drawing those invisible circles. That night, I found one of the missing ornaments on my pillow. It wasn't intact. The porcelain angel I remembered had been shattered into shards, its face powdered into dust. Only the wings remained. Beneath them, a single scrap of paper with one word written in jagged strokes: vacancy. The next day, the changes escalated. Every chair in the kitchen was turned to face the back door, perfectly aligned. The wreath I'd hung was gone, replaced with a circle of wired bird bones tied together with a red ribbon. The house wasn't just shifting things now, it was sending messages. I tried to reason with myself. Stress, exhaustion, but deep down, I understood what was happening. The mortgage wasn't numbers on paper, it was a leap. Every payment tethered me tighter, feeding the thing that breathed through the walls, watched me from the vents, shifted the objects in plain sight just to remind me I didn't belong. Late one night I looked at the statement again. The numbers had changed, no longer interest rates or due date coordinates, strings of latitude and longitude, pointing to somewhere far into the woods, outside town. I didn't go. Some part of me knew that was the invitation, that was the trap, and I wasn't ready to step into whatever waited there. Not yet, but I couldn't sleep. I woke at 3:33 every night, heart pounding, the sense that someone had just left the room. Every mirror in the house grew cloudy with smudges, small handprints stretched too long, too narrow to be mine, or my son. I swore I heard laughter in the vents, a dry, brittle sound, like twigs snapping in winter air, and still I stayed, because I couldn't leave. The house wouldn't let me. I slammed the statement on the table in front of my son one morning, my voice cracking. "Why are you doing that?" He didn't flinch. His eyes flicked down at the paper, then up at me. "I'm not." "Then who is?" I demanded. A pause, the faint curl of that almost smile again. "You already know." That was when it broke inside me, the realization I had been circling around for days. The mortgage wasn't security, it wasn't stability, it was a shackle, and my son wasn't warning me anymore. He was reminding me. That's when I decided I wouldn't pay the mortgage anymore, not a cent, because if a house can own you, then maybe the only way to survive is to start.
I didn't just miss the payment. I didn't forget. I canceled it. You know the difference, right? Forgetting is sloppy, accidental, human. Canceling is deliberate, surgical. It's choosing to sever the cord that's been feeding something you no longer want alive. It felt ritualistic. I didn't light candles or chant. I sat at my desk, logged into the bank's portal, and hovered over the little button that read, "Cancel Autopay." My hand shook, like I was about to inject poison straight into a vein. And in a way, I was. I could hear the house listening. The air was tight around me. Walls leaning closer. A floorboard upstairs groaned, though no one should have been walking there. My son was in his room, or maybe something that looked like him was. Click. It shouldn't have felt like that. Canceling a payment should be boring, transactional, forgettable. Instead, it was like pulling a plug out of a writhing wet socket. My monitor flickered. For half a second, I swear I saw numbers on the screen, shift into symbols, spirals, claws, something almost like veins branching out. Then they snapped back into dollars and cents. Payment canceled. Done. But it wasn't just numbers on a screen. The moment I confirmed it, I heard whispers, not voices I could make out, but the low hum of conspirators behind a wall. The kind of sound that makes you lean closer, straining to hear, even though you know if you do hear it, it'll undo you. I leaned in anyway. The whispers had rhythm, like an old language. The cadence reminded me of contract clauses, the way lawyers drone on, only this time it wasn't paperwork being described. It was me. My name curled up out of the static, spoken in a tongue no human throat should manage. I recoiled, yanked my headphones off, except I wasn't wearing headphones. The sound was inside the house, inside the walls. The lights dimmed, not all at once, but like a slow exhale, as if the house itself sighed in resignation. A picture frame tipped off the shelf and shattered, but I didn't even flinch. The shards on the floor didn't reflect my face the way glass should. They reflected someone taller, someone sharper, someone smiling at me. That was when it hit me. Mortgages were never just about money. They've always been blood pacts, modern versions of the old tithes people paid to keep their land safe from whatever prowled outside. Miss a payment and you don't lose your house, you lose yourself. Canceling it wasn't just rebellion, it was breaking the pact, ripping the parchment in half, smearing the signature in blood. For a fleeting moment I thought I'd done it. I'd freed us. My son would snap out of his strange alien trance. The house would release its grip. And for a breath I felt light, weightless, like I'd finally told the universe no, and it had listened. But then I felt something else, a vibration under my feet, subtle but steady. The foundation was breathing. The air was thicker, damp, pressing against my chest like the pressure before a storm. The mortgage company sent an email almost immediately, not the usual bland, automated payment canceled notice. No, this one came from an address I didn't recognize, and the subject line wasn't words. It was just an hourglass icon, pulsing red. Inside, the email was blank, except for one sentence. You think you're free? I closed the laptop so hard it rattled my teeth. My son knocked on the door a second later. Soft, too soft. Dad, his voice was wrong. Not deep, not high, just flat, like a recording slowed down a fraction of a second. Why did you do that? I couldn't answer, not because I didn't know what to say, but because the words wouldn't leave my throat. The house was holding them hostage. The whispers grew loud as shadows in the corner of the room, stretched upward. No longer content to just sit quietly, I watched them bend across the ceiling, curling around the light fixture like fingers reaching down. And in that moment, I realized something. Canceling the mortgage hadn't freed me. It had called attention to me. It had marked me. I thought I was free. I was wrong. It started small, subtle enough that if I'd wanted to lie to myself, I could have written it off as stress, bad lighting, imagination. But stress doesn't make your son's pupils look like they've been hollowed out with a spoon. Stress doesn't make his words echo in an empty room, even when he's standing right in front of you. One night I passed by his door. It was open just a crack, and the glow from his lamp spilled out into the hallway. I expected to see him hunched over his phone, scrolling TikTok or whatever teenagers pretend keeps them sane these days. Instead, I saw him sitting perfectly still on the edge of his bed,
staring at the wall, not his phone, not a book, just the blank wall. "Hey champ, you okay?" I asked. His head turned, slow as a marionette, whose strings were caught in mud. His face was pale, skin pulled tight in places it shouldn't be, shadows nesting under his eyes, and his eyes. God, they didn't shine. They absorbed. Staring into them felt like staring down the barrel of a well, so deep you'd never hear the stone hit bottom. "You weren't supposed to be here." His voice had a static undercurrent, like two recordings slightly out of sync. I forced a laugh, tried to break the tension. Yeah. "Merry Christmas to you too, buddy. Don't worry, I'll give you your space." But he didn't smile. He didn't even blink. The next morning, he was at the kitchen table before me. That's never happened. Usually I'd have to knock on his door 3 times before he even acknowledged daylight. But there he was, waiting. He didn't have cereal or toast in front of him, just a folded piece of paper. He slid it toward me as I entered. I opened it, expecting a shopping list, maybe a note about a field trip. Instead, it was a list of names, not random names, family names. My father's, my sister's, my ex-wife's. Some were scratched out, others weren't. My name was at the bottom, not crossed out. Yet I stared at him, pulse hammering in my throat. "Where did you get this?" He tilted his head. "You told me." "No, I didn't. I've never." "Yes, you did." He cut me off, the corners of his mouth twitching into something between a smile and a siege. "You told me when you thought I was asleep. You tell me everything." I wanted to deny it, but my tongue was heavy, somewhere deep in my chest. A truth stirred that I didn't want to meet eye to eye. The changes worse. His movements lost their teenage clumsiness, replaced with a predatory grace that didn't belong in a 15-year-old. He didn't trip over the dog's water bowl anymore. He didn't shuffle in socks. He glided. His voice grew detached. His laugh absent. Even the way he chewed food was wrong. Deliberate, rhythmic, mechanical. And he knew things no one should know. He recited the exact words my father screamed the night he died, even though my son had never met him. He described my sister's scar, the one she hides under long sleeves, the one from when she tried to end it all. He whispered my ex-wife's new address into my ear while I pretended to sleep. Every revelation was a knife in the illusion that this was still my child. I tried calling my sister once, just to ground myself, just to hear another voice that tethered me to the version of reality I used to believe in. I didn't even get past the first ring before my son appeared in the doorway, eyes hollow, smile stretched. "She won't answer. She's busy." And when the line went dead, I believed him. He began to follow me around the house, not like a clingy kid, not like someone seeking comfort, like a shadow, like a guard. I'd feel his eyes on the back of my neck when I typed at my desk. I'd catch him watching me sleep from the crack in the door. "You weren't supposed to be here," he said again one night, standing over me while I lay frozen in bed. His voice layered like there was someone else inside him, speaking through him. Where was I supposed to be? I whispered, unable to stop myself. The smile widened, teeth too many, too sharp in the glow of the nightlight. Gone. I should have left then, packed a bag, fled into the cold, but the house wouldn't let me, and neither would he. Every time I touched the doorknob, I felt heat pulsing from it, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. Every time I looked out the window, the street seemed unfamiliar, stretched too long, lit by a moon that wasn't the right color. And still he followed, still he whispered, "You don't belong here. This house isn't yours. You should have left when you had the chance." I kept telling myself he was my son, that this was just some twisted phase, a psychotic break, maybe something medical that could be explained away. But deep down in the marrow of my bones, I knew the truth. This wasn't him anymore. It might never have been him. And then came Christmas Eve. Christmas wasn't for us. It was for the house. I didn't realize it until the moment I walked into the living room and saw the tree, The lights flickered in a rhythm that wasn't random. Red, green, green, red, pause, red, green, pause, like signals being sent to someone or something that was listening. And the presence, that was the worst part. I hadn't wrapped anything yet. Hell, I hadn't even bought most of the gifts. But there they were, stacked neatly under the tree in perfect rows. Identical boxes, all the same shape and size, wrapped in paper that shimmered like oil on water. When I stepped closer, I saw my name scrawled on one of the tags. Not in my son's handwriting, not in mine, a hand I didn't recognize. The house was awake, breathing. Every board creaked like joints, stretching after a long sleep. The walls groaned and shuddered, as though flexing against the cold. Somewhere deep in the vents, a voice hummed, not words, just a low vibration, something like the drone of a hive. And then I saw him, my son at least, the shape of him, sitting cross-legged by the tree. The glow of the lights painted his face, in alternating red and green, and each color seemed to change him. In red he was almost normal, just a boy. In green his eyes vanished into black pits, his smile stretching too far. "You broke the contract," he said. The words made the tree lights flicker faster, buzzing like a short circuit. I didn't. My throat tightened. I just canceled the payment. That's all. His laugh was hollow, dry as paper tearing. That's not all. That was never all. The money wasn't the point. The signatures weren't the point. The house feeds. The house keeps. You broke the pact. I shook my head, backing away, but the floorboards under me pulsed soft like muscle instead of wood. I stumbled, and the house laughed through the pipes, a wet gurgling that echoed in my chest. "What do you mean? The house feeds?" My voice cracked, desperate. "Feeds on." He tilted his head, unblinking. "On you." The tree lights flared white, for a split second, and in that flash I saw the truth. The walls were slick with something alive, a skin stretched over bone. The garland wound around the banister wasn't tinsel, it was veins, pulsing faintly with each flicker of light. The star on top of the tree twitched, like a pupil dilating. I stumbled back, knocking into the table, and one of the gifts fell over. The box split open. It wasn't a gift. Inside was a heart, still beating. I gagged, stumbling further, but the sun-shaped thing just kept staring at me, smile wide enough to tear his face in two. "You weren't supposed to be here," he repeated, voice vibrating with the house itself. You should have let it take you quietly. But now it has to keep you." The shadows stretched longer, wrapping around my legs like vines. The presence shuddered, boxes trembling, lids straining, as if something inside wanted out. The whispers from the walls grew louder, overlapping, dozens of voices chanting clauses, demands, terms of a contract, older than paper. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The words were inside me, burrowing, rooting. "Stop," I begged. "Please." He stood, unfolding himself in a way no boy should move, joints bending just slightly wrong. Taller now, or maybe the ceiling, lower, his eyes hollow, glowing faint green from within. "You broke the contract. Now you belong to the house." I tried to run, but the front door was gone. The windows were gone. Every exit sealed behind a wall of flesh like wood. Breathing slow and steady, my chest seized with terror. I was trapped. The lights on the tree blinked again, faster and faster, until they weren't lights anymore but eyes. Dozens, maybe hundreds, staring at me, unblinking. The branches writhed, reaching for me with claws made of pine needles, sharp enough to draw blood. And my son, the thing that wore his face, opened his mouth wide enough to unhinge, wide enough to swallow the world, and whispered one final truth. "Christmas isn't for you. It never was. It's for the house." I should have run, but it was already too late. I stood, frozen, my back pressed against the trembling wall, while the thing that looked like my son stepped closer. Each footfall was too deliberate, too heavy, like the house itself shifted to accommodate it. His shadow stretched in ways shadows shouldn't, longer, sharper, splitting into branching limbs that crawled up the walls like cracks in glass. For a moment I tried to find my boy in that face, the son I had raised, the one I tucked in after nightmares, the one who used to draw lopsided snowmen on construction paper at Christmas. But the more I looked, the more I realized there was nothing left. If anything, there was a cruel parody of him, like a portrait painted by something that had only skimmed the surface of humanity and missed the heart entirely. Why, I croaked, why wear his face? His grin spread too wide, splitting the skin at the corners of his mouth into hairline fissures that gleamed wet. Because you gave him to us, every month, every payment, piece by piece. You fed him into the walls. The words landed like a hammer. My stomach lurched. No, I was paying for this house. For our life, I was providing. You were sacrificing. He interrupted. His voice echoed through the beams, making the ceiling tremble. Mortgages are not money. Mortgages are marrow, blood, memory. Every check, every transfer. It took something, and we took it gladly. That's why you never felt whole, did you? That's why you woke in the night with the taste of iron on your tongue. You weren't paying bills. You were feeding us. Images crashed into my mind. Nights I couldn't remember. Days that slipped past in blurs. The vacant look in my son's eyes that I had told myself was just adolescence. No, it was hunger. It was the house chewing through him. Why him? My voice cracked. Why my boy? The grin faded into something worse. A cold, flat stare that pulsed with green light from deep within the sockets. Because you signed. Because you agreed. Because parents always promise their children to the walls, whether they know it or not. I collapsed to my knees, bile burning my throat. The house groaned around me and the Christmas tree's lights pulsed faster, keeping time with my racing heart. The unopened presents rattled, and I knew without opening them that each box contained a part of me, a part of him, bones, teeth, memories wrapped in shimmering paper. The thing stepped closer, crouching so its hollow eyes met mine. But now you've broken the pact. You canceled the flow. The house is starving, and something must feed it tonight. I wanted to scream. I wanted to, but all I could do was whisper, "Take me, leave him." The creature tilted its head, almost curious. "You give yourself? He's my son," I said, even though part of me wasn't sure that was true anymore. Maybe he had been consumed long before tonight. Maybe what stood before me was all that was left. Still, I couldn't bring myself to stop believing. Not completely. For a flicker, something like amusement flashed in its eyes. That's the problem with you people. You think sacrifice is noble, but to the house it makes no difference. Meat is meat. Blood is blood. The walls shuddered, cracks splitting across the ceiling, dust raining down. The tree convulsed, branches writhing like serpents, and then the whispers rose to a crescendo. Thousands of voices, chanting in unison, "Choose, choose." I felt the weight of the decision clawing into me. If I fought, I'd lose. If I fled, the house would swallow me whole. And if I gave myself, maybe it would buy him one last breath. The thing leaned in, its lips almost brushing my ear. "You broke the pact. Now you must finish. Will you give yourself, or let me devour what you love?" Tears blurred my vision. My body shook, but beneath it all was a strange clarity, a brutal truth. I couldn't escape. I had already been sacrificing him, inch by inch for years, signing papers, working hours, paying bills. I had traded his childhood for this roof, this illusion of safety, and by canceling the payment, I had only pulled the mask away. The house didn't want money, it wanted us. I looked at the thing, at the pale echo of the boy I had raised, and whispered the only words I could manage. I made my choice. I wish I could tell you I chose the noble thing, that I threw myself into the teeth of the house and spared my son. That would make this a redemption story, wouldn't it? The kind you could close your laptop after and feel clean, feel safe. But there are no clean endings here. There never were. All I know is this: the house didn't collapse, the walls didn't stop breathing, the whispers didn't go silent. Something was fed that night, and I'm still here, though I don't feel like myself anymore. Sometimes when I catch my reflection in a dark window, I see the edges of me ripple, as if I've been painted onto glass instead of born into flesh. Sometimes I hear a second heartbeat when I press my hand to my chest, one deeper, slower in rhythm with the creaks of the floorboards. Maybe I'm part of the house now. Maybe I was swallowed whole, digested, and spat back out as a hollowed version of myself. Or maybe the house only took what it needed, just enough to keep me breathing, so I could serve as a warning. And my son, I can't say for sure if what walks these halls now is really him. He smiles at me sometimes too wide, too still. He calls me Dad in that familiar tone, but there's an echo under it, like two voices overlapping. And when he hugs me, I feel his arms pressed too tightly, like the embrace of the house itself. I thought canceling the mortgage was rebellion. I thought it was free, but it only revealed the truth. The payments were never about money. They were about blood, memory, flesh rent, for existing in a place that was never ours, a contract we were born into without consent. And here's the part that will keep you awake tonight: I'm not the only one. This house is not the only one. Mortgages, deeds, contracts, they've always been written in more than ink. How many families have already been eaten alive, smiling in Christmas photos with hollow eyes, never realizing they were feeding the walls every month? If you think this is just a story, just some creepypasta you can shrug off before bed, ask yourself, why does your house settle at night? Why do the pipes groan when you're alone? Why do you wake with the taste of metal in your mouth? You might think you're safe, you might think your family is whole, but if your child ever looks at you with those empty eyes and says, I wasn't expecting you for Christmas, don't make the mistake I did. Don't cancel the mortgage, because once the house is hungry, it won't just let you go. Now tell me, what do you think happened to me, to him, to the house? Leave your theory below, because I need to know I'm not the only one who sees the truth. And remember, Christmas isn't for us, it's for the